Good Thursday afternoon. Welcome into the Postgame show. I'm Elijah Campbell. As always, no Jay Phillips today or tomorrow. Jay's out for the week, and it is NFL Draft Day. It's finally here. I'm not one to really love talking about the draft process per se. I think the combine's insanely overrated. Don't love talking about it. So much is speculation. I do love when we get close to it, though, and we can finally start discussing draft strategy, like the fun stuff, right? I love getting into that. I can talk about that all day. Shoot, I think what took up my morning meeting with Terry Ford, I think it took up the entire time talking about NFL draft strategy. Teams that draft well, teams that don't, specifically quarterbacks and how hard it is. Talked about the stat that was thrown around on ESPN where, wide receivers have the lowest hit rate in terms of drafting guys in the first round that end up getting a second contract for their team. I found that to be really surprising. But if you think about it, there have been a lot of wide receiver flops over the last few years. It's a hard position to evaluate. Drafting is really, really, really hard. And earlier today, don't watch Get Up a ton, but I did see, this morning, we're talking about draft evaluation. And I don't know if there is a better way to describe exactly how hard it is to draft than when Ryan Clark this morning kind of broke it down really well. And I had to save it. As soon as I heard it and read the transcript, I was like, we got to use this to open up the show today. Because what we're going to do, we're going to talk a lot about the quarterbacks that are going to be taken in the first round tonight that we're going to see. We're going to talk a lot about the Gamecock players, specifically Xavier Legette and Spencer Rattler, who are going to be taken. Legette might be taken tonight. We'll see. We're going to make some proclamations. We're going to discuss some of the hot takes that we have or any evaluation takes that we've discovered over the last few weeks looking at these players. But before we start any of this draft discourse, before I start reeling off takes here, I do want to establish this is hard. And that's what makes the NFL draft arguably the most interesting thing about the NFL, is because it's an inexact science, but it's one of the more important things that you do. You can make or break seasons based off the draft. You can ruin the future of your franchise by whiffing on draft picks. Right? I oftentimes use, the New Orleans Saints in 2017. That draft class made them took them from an average team to a team that won 3 or 4 consecutive division titles because they got a lot of really good players on rookie deals. It's hard, and it can make or break you. And a really good breakdown today by ESPN's Ryan Clark talking about, because he was asked, which quarterback is a can't-miss prospect. And I think he breaks it down. There is no such thing as a can't-miss prospect. And it discusses exactly how hard this whole exercise is when it comes to drafting.
Quarterback.
Okay, RC, you heard Mike T. Which QB you believe can't miss?
They all can miss. Hell, if there was can't-miss players, Mike T wouldn't be working for us. This job is hard. It's hard to evaluate players. We see quarterbacks all the time who we think have the opportunities to be potential Hall of Famers that don't pan out. Did we ever think that right now Mac Jones would be the backup to Trevor Lawrence, who's actually struggling to reach his potential as well? A guy like Justin Fields is already in Pittsburgh. Zach Wilson is in Denver. It's difficult to evaluate this position, and if you don't have the right people around a young quarterback, a quarterback who's willing to work and put effort into executing, then it can all fall through. I'm never going to give a guy a can't-miss grade, not in this draft or any.
Okay, Mike.
Not in this draft or any, and I think that's about as good as you could put it. There is no such thing as can't miss. There are risks attached to every single player that you're going to end up picking. Whether it be quarterback, wide receiver, then that's what makes this fun, right? It's fun to whiff on some players. Man, about a decade ago, I could have told you I thought Trey Waynes was going to be the best cornerback in the NFL. And if you didn't take him top 10 in the draft he came out in, then you really messed up. Trey Waynes was not a very good corner in the NFL, but you couldn't have convinced me that at the time. I thought that guy would be a lockdown NFL corner and was going to make life for NFL receivers a living hell. whiffed on that one. And that's the fun part about it. We whiff on prospects, and we as non-NFL GMs can have fun with this. We can talk about prospects we like. The pressure is significantly different when you're in the front office of a National Football League team, which is why today for our poll question, I wanted us to put our GM hats on a little bit and have a little bit of fun with it. And that's that which quarterback in this draft will have the best NFL career. Caleb Williams, who's the presumed number 1 overall pick, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and then I threw in Spencer Rattler in there just for fun, just to see how optimistic the fan base is. And Spencer Rattler has 65.5% of the 165 votes. And in second, and this is kind of a little surprising, but not a ton because we are an SEC country, Jaden Daniels is in second at 17%, Caleb Williams in third at 9%, Drake May at 8%. And look, because we are an SEC country and Jaden Daniels put up the season he did, it's not surprising to see that a lot of people would believe that he's going to be the best quarterback, or he's going to have the best career of any of these quarterbacks in the draft right now. And why it's not surprising is because I also agree. I am a Jaden Daniels truther. I am about as big of a fan of Jaden Daniels and how he plays football as you could possibly imagine. I don't know if I can be elected into this position or if I can just give myself the title, but I am the director of Jaden Daniels propaganda. I think this guy is going to be an absolute stud. And with the way the NFL is now, he might be one of the closest things to Lamar Jackson we've seen. And look, I voted in this poll. I voted for Jaden Daniels. And I love to use some specific stats to help project forward, right? To help project what a quarterback can do in the NFL. And sometimes that's dangerous too. And I'm the reason, one of the reasons I didn't think Josh Allen would be a great quarterback at all is because he threw so many interceptions at Wyoming. So many. He didn't have a great completion percentage. The numbers weren't there, but he was bleeping huge with massive hands and a rocket arm. And that enamored NFL teams. And whenever the Buffalo Bills took him so high, I was just positive, was for sure that was going to flop. It did not. He's an all-pro caliber quarterback. It is a franchise quarterback. I thought the Packers taking Jordan Love was a waste of a draft pick because he threw 17 interceptions his last year at Utah State. And newsflash, defenses in the NFL are a smidge better than the defenses he faced in the Mountain West. It took some time, and it took playing behind Aaron Rodgers, and it took a lot of Aaron Rodgers' hissy fits and the eventual departure from Green Bay for him to get his shot as a starter. And you know what? In his first full season as a starter, he won a road playoff game against an NFL division winner. And he's projecting to be a pretty good quarterback now. I would not have thought that the day he was drafted in 2020. Would have never have guessed that. It's an inexact science, and it's really tough. But I do like Jaden Daniels. He obviously passes the eye test. For anybody that watched him this year, he ran all over the place. Historic season on the ground in his Heisman season. But what I love about Jaden Daniels and what makes him the best quarterback in this draft, in my opinion, is that he throws the best deep ball. And he does a lot of things that translate really well. Yes, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. are two NFL receivers, and I think both of them will hear their names called tonight in the first round of the draft. But what separates Daniels is when you look at those numbers on throwing the ball down the field, on passes over 20 yards in the air, his adjusted completion percentage is 69%, which basically all it does is account for drops, right? So if your completion percentage is 64, but it would be 69 if you didn't have the drops, they adjust it to 69%. 69% adjusted completion percentage on deep balls. To give you a comparison, Drake May's is 56%. Caleb Williams on such throws is 53%. His touchdown interception ratio, 22-0 on those passes. Didn't throw a single pick on a deep ball, and they threw a ton of them at LSU. As explosive as that offense was, they threw a ton of deep balls. Not once was one picked off. And very few were considered turnover-worthy plays. One stat I do enjoy on Pro Football Focus is they do categorize throws as big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays. 45% of those throws that he made 20 yards down the field were classified as big-time throws, and only 1.7% of those were considered turnover-worthy plays. So despite the high volume of passes down the field from Jaden Daniels, there weren't a lot of instances where he's putting the ball in harm's way. That's incredibly impressive. He's got great touch on that deep ball. He's got great decision-making on that deep ball. And his overall Pro Football Focus grade on passes over 20 yards in the air is a 99. People who get paid money to evaluate the sport and who try to project this type of stuff to the next level see his deep ball and almost consider it perfect. And he's improved a lot. Yeah, he's older. He's going to be one of the older quarterbacks drafted in recent memory. And he's had a pretty extensive career starting off at Arizona State. And he had to develop. But you saw exactly what that development has culminated to in a Heisman Trophy winning season. Yes, I understand not all Heisman Trophy winners become great NFL quarterbacks, because if that's the case, Eric Crouch would have won somebody a Super Bowl. Obviously not. Tim Tebow would have won somebody a Super Bowl. The Heisman is not a guaranteed ticket to success in the NFL. But the Heisman's not what qualifies Jaden Daniels as the best quarterback in this draft. Sure, sometimes, he can bail out of a clean pocket. Sure, sometimes he kamikazes himself into a group of defenders and gets absolutely crushed on some plays and needs to learn how to slide. Because in the NFL, those hits you're going to take when you're scrambling to try to get first downs, you're more likely to result in injury than they are at the college level, despite playing really good SEC defenses. Jaden Daniels is a freak, man. I am enamored with watching this guy play. There's a lot of Lamar Jackson that comes to mind. He's not as fast, but I think he has great pocket presence. He knows when to tuck it and run, even if it's a little overzealous with it or over ambitious with his ability to tuck and run. I think that can be coached. I like Caleb Williams too. I'm not here to say Caleb Williams is a bust. Not going to say that, because Caleb Williams sometimes makes some throws that absolutely wow me. But when it comes to the poll question that I conjured up, if I had to pick the player that I think is going to be the best NFL quarterback in this group, it's not going to be the guy who's going number 1 to the Chicago Bears. It's going to be the guy who more than likely will be going number 2 to the Washington Commanders. A whole lot of draft stuff to get into. Mega draft preview day. I am excited because coming up next, I've got 5 first-round draft proclamations. Some can be answered after tonight. Some we will wait and see until the end of the first year. But I got 5 draft day proclamations that I'm excited to get into. I'll tell you what those are when the postgame show continues with a draft day preview special. It's draft day. You're listening to the Postgame Show as we get you ready for tonight's first round of the NFL Draft. I'll also get you ready to maybe discuss the best landing spots for some Gamecock players. We'll get into that later in this hour. We'll also get to my 5 declarations for tonight's first round of the NFL Draft. But first, we're going to get to the phone lines. 803-404-6100. Call in to weigh in. My man Charles is calling in right now to discuss the poll question about who is going to be the best pro of the players, or quarterbacks specifically, that are in line to hear their names heard on draft day. Charles, thanks for calling in, man.
Hey, appreciate it. I hope you're having a good day, and hope everybody else has as well. I wanted to weigh in, and I will start off by saying that the great Billy Shakespeare wrote that brevity is the soul of wit, and I am going to try to keep my point as concise as possible for your time's sake. I don't know if you had a Shakespeare quote on your draft day coverage bingo card, but there you go.
Nope, not on mine.
So I'll start off by saying what I'm about to say is obvious. I mean, I'm a Gamecock, and so I do have my garnet-colored glasses on. And also, I'm about to say things as concise as possible that many others have said before. That being said, using the word said way too many times, the poll question is the best quarterback, but obviously that can be very nuanced. Mm-hmm. Best career. I know that there's the idea of, signing the second contract with the team that drafts you, and then that implies the tie-in to who drafts you. And the earlier, as a quarterback, that you're drafted, typically the worst-run franchise that drafted you. And so even like with the Washington Commanders, not great. Like if the New York Jets or something. Yep. So all that being said, I'm going to pose with my very garnet-colored glasses. I do think that Spencer Rattler, is poised to have the best career in the NFL. I say that with a caveat that there is something to be said about one of the best NFL careers. I hope he is a starter at some point, but one of the best NFL careers is the backup quarterback that is constantly getting paid for a very long career.
The Chase Daniel special, as I call it.
But I think, yeah, exactly. So, but I think he could be a great starter one day, but also because he's not going to likely be chosen in the first round, then he could more likely, hopefully, end up with a team that doesn't need him to start right away and will be a better fit for him. And I know a lot of people have said that. So I'm going to stop there without getting too wordy for the sake of my opening statement. I don't want to betray that. So that's my take. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your call, Charles. And there are some really good points made there, specifically when it comes to the organization. I wrote down exactly with all the quarterbacks that are projected to be selected, at least once we get to Spencer Rattler. And I kind of had my projection on where they go, because that's a really good point too. Look, is Justin Fields' career a lot better if he's not playing in Chicago or didn't start his career in Chicago? Maybe, because there are holes in every quarterback's game, and it's up to the coaches to be able to have to develop that and make you a competent quarterback in the future, or a competent player, right? Like, bad coaching can ruin careers, and that is why I'm terrified for Bryce Young. I think Bryce Young will get it figured out despite the Carolina Panthers, because I think Bryce Young is just that good of a player. But that's a good question, and I'll address it with, here are the players that are, the teams I think they're going to go to, and that can oftentimes decide exactly whose career is best. Caleb Williams will be a Chicago Bear. Feel pretty good about that. Jayden Daniels will be a Washington Commander. Feel solid about that. Drake May is going to be a New England Patriot. I feel decent about that. I don't think they trade out of it. I think more than likely that's exactly who they get, because Robert Kraft is reportedly gung-ho on drafting a quarterback. And, without Bill Belichick to tell him no, I think he's going to make sure he gets what he wants. So I think Drake May will be a New England Patriot. I think Michael Penix will be a Las Vegas Raider. I think J.J. McCarthy will be a Minnesota Viking. I think Bo Nix will be a New York Giant. I think Spencer Rattler will be a Denver Bronco. Now, what gives Spencer Rattler, if this unfolds, and this is how it plays out in this hypothetical here, what's going to help out Spencer Rattler as opposed to everybody else is he's going to have the best quarterback coach in Sean Payton. What Sean Payton did with Drew Brees was magical. I'm not just saying that because I grew up a New Orleans Saints fan. It is true that I watched Drew Brees be their quarterback for a decade and a half. He was really, really good. That offense was really, really good. Sean Payton knows how to maneuver an offense around the strength of the quarterback, but be able to make a system to where they can adjust on the fly. They're so detail-oriented. He prepares religiously. They religiously prepare for the defenses they play against. And I think Spencer Rattler's got a really good mind. He's got a good football mind. And I think that's what Sean Payton's really looking for. Someone who has been humbled by their experiences, because think about it. He just done coaching Russell Wilson this past year. Russell Wilson is a lot of things, maybe one day a Hall of Famer, but one thing that he's not, if you believe the reports of him having his own office at the facility instead of maybe congregating in the locker room with other players, is maybe a humility. Spencer Rattler's going to have that. He's got a mind for the game. I think a pairing between Spencer Rattler and Sean Payton would be one of the best things for his career. That would help out if things unfolded that way. I think if Bo Nix goes to the Giants, which in this situation, I have him slightly projected to be a New York Giant, Brian Daboll's going to be coaching for his job. And I don't know exactly how high they are on Daniel Jones. Brian Daboll's a good quarterback coach. I thought he did a fantastic job with Josh Allen. I want to use this D word again, development. What is the one thing that Josh Allen had a knock on at Wyoming? Incomplete passes, inaccuracy, decision-making, interceptions. All really bad things that get you very concerned if you're a fan of an NFL team and they use their first-round pick to draft a quarterback with those type of red flags. But Brian Daboll coached it out of him. He helped coach it out of him. He did things that he knew that Josh Allen was going to be really good at. And ultimately, that made Josh Allen, along with Josh Allen doing those things and committing to change his play, into turning him into an all-pro caliber quarterback. There's a lot of variables that go into this, and I think what Charles brings up a really good point of is the situation, the nurture matters as much as the nature does. And that's true. That's absolutely true. I'm still that high on Jaden Daniels. Like I said, I am the head of the propaganda department for Jaden Daniels. And if I'm a Commanders fan, I am frothing at the mouth to be able to get this man on my football team and be their quarterback. But that is an interesting discussion. Nature versus nurture when it comes to quarterbacks, it's a really good point. So good call there from Charles. Real quick, we'll go ahead and get my man Gamecock Larry. And I saw him calling as Charles was giving the spiel, so I had to put him on hold. Gamecock Larry, sir, how are you doing this afternoon?
I've been trying to talk to you for a long time, but let me tell you, I am an old-timer, long-timer. But I will say right now, you Jaden Daniels and all these others that you've been naming off, I don't follow pro football, but I will be willing to bet my house on Stetler Rattler. Stetler Rattler he will have the best. That's what the gentleman said just for me. I think he'll have the better career in the NFL. Jaden Daniels, he's good, but I don't think I wouldn't even pick him in my draft. I might be. I wouldn't even pick him. Not first. I would put, if I was in charge of a draft in pro football today, I would pick Spencer Rattler. And this old man's got a lot. I forget a lot, but I got a lot of flat. But I'll tell you, Spencer Rattler will have a better career in the NFL than any of those others you just named. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Is this Elijah?
Yes, sir. It is. Last time I checked, I think it is.
Can I say one other thing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I don't know how to say this. If I'm wrong, just cut me off. But my friends that own and sponsor the Gamecock Larry dragster and motocross teams, they want to give old Gamecock Larry an early 90th birthday get together, whatever you want to say, on the May the 11th, because my birthday is August the 1st.
Very nice.
But they say it's too hot then. They check their schedule. And so they decided, and they told my daughter they want to pitch.
Gamecock Larry, we got to hit a break here real quick. I'll get you off the air there, and I'll make sure we get that out for everybody who wants to attend. So appreciate your call. Good stuff. Awesome discussion. I'll get to those 5 proclamations of the draft in the first round next. And go to 1075thegame.com and register for the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. As always, every game, $25 is added to the pot. And if Gamecock hitter rips a Grand Slam home run, you can win all the cash in the pot. And let me tell you right now, since there have not been a Grand Slam all season long, that pot's gotten to $1,000. And as I say all the time, you can't win if you don't sign up. So you're going to really start kicking yourself if the Gamecocks hit a Grand Slam over the weekend. You're sitting on your couch watching the game. You see a Grand Slam get hit, and you're like, that money could have been mine. The only way that you can win, I can guarantee you this. I can't guarantee that you win, but I guarantee you that you have a chance if you just go to 1075thegame.com and register. Again, that's the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. And right now, I'm going to give away some draft proclamations. Listen in the next hour of the show, I'll give away baseball tickets, but you got to listen. If you want to get some tickets to the Kentucky series this weekend, we're going to break down that series a little bit too. And it's not just a vital one because it's a big RPI series, but buddy, this is a winnable one too. I'll tell you why later on in the show. But now it's time for the 5 draft proclamations that I have for tonight. Some of them can be answered. We'll know if I'm right or wrong within 24 hours. Some will have to wait a little bit. And one of those, in which time will tell, will be number 1. Number 1. Notre Dame offensive tackle Joe Alt will be the first player drafted tonight to make an all-pro team. So out of all the players that are going to be taken tonight in the first round, Joe Alt's a guaranteed first rounder. I highly doubt he slips outside the top 10, but he's projected to be the first offensive tackle taken. He'll be the first player that has his name called tonight to make an all-pro team. Could do it as early as next season, and I feel pretty good about that. Joe Alt is an elite run blocker, and if you watch Notre Dame play this year, they were dominant on the ground. Yes, Sam Hartman is a solid quarterback. I like Sam Hartman, but that's not why the Notre Dame offense ran. Or not why. That's not how they operated. Better way to put it. Running is a little too literal here because we're talking about the ground game. But their ground game was really good. They're picking up well over 5 yards a pop for the season. Audric Estime had a cartoonish year on the ground. He was picking up over 6 yards a pop. And Audric Estime is a good running back. But Joe Alt is the cog that makes that machine go. That man is a great run blocker. He is a great pass blocker. Technically speaking, pass blocking is not his forte, but he had a 91 Pro Football Focus rating, gave up only 1 sack on 368 pass block snaps. Only 2 quarterback hurries on those 368 pass block snaps. An absolute machine on the offensive line. Joe Alt is the best big nasty that we have in the trenches in this draft, and if you pair him with a really good running game, woo, you're going to see exactly the potential he has. It feels destined for him to be a Tennessee Titan at pick 7. People I talk to that still cover the Titans feel pretty good about that too. They got an offensive-minded head coach in Brian Callahan, who was the former OC for the Cincinnati Bengals. They have the quarterback they deem the quarterback of the future with Will Levis. They signed Tony Pollard in free agency. They still have Tyjae Spears from Tulane, who was a rookie last season, who proved to be a really solid running back. Peter Skoronski was drafted in the first round last year to be on the other side of the line. He'll play the right tackle, and he picked up and improved as the year went on after, I would say, a slow start. But they're going to have their bookend tackles, and they're going to be able to run the ball at will. I don't think Will Levis is going to be all-pro or anything like that at quarterback, but that offense is going to be a top-end offense in the NFL because Joe Alt helps make them that way. I think he'll be the first of these guys to make an all-pro team. Number 2, tonight, one team will trade into the top 10 to snag J.J. McCarthy specifically, and that team will be the Minnesota Vikings. Look, the Vikings are in a very odd spot right now. They lost Kirk Cousins last year to an Achilles injury. They still competed for a playoff spot because they have really good weapons. Kirk Cousins had a lot of good weapons around him. Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the NFL, and I feel pretty comfortable saying that and declaring that. TJ Hawkinson's one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the NFL. You have a decent run game. You got a lot of weapons. Jordan Addison, they drafted, wide receiver from Southern Cal last year, had a really solid rookie season. And they still put up good numbers with guys like Josh Dobbs and Jaron Hall at the quarterback position. but they need their guy. The Vikings are in a spot right now. They're paying a lot of position players top money to be able to produce right away. And they need a quarterback who will be cost efficient, who will not cost them as much as Kirk Cousins cost them, because trust me, Kirk Cousins cost a lot of money. He had a massive contract attached to him. But now without that burden that you have contractually, you need to be able to have a quarterback on a rookie deal be able to win you something. I don't think you're going to trade into the top 3 to get one of May, Daniels, or Williams, but I think you can draft or trade into the top 5 to get J.J. McCarthy. I think the Vikings do that tonight. Tonight we're going to see exactly, number 3 here, we're going to see exactly 6 wide receivers in the first round. 5 of them I can guarantee who they're going to be. Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., and A.D. Mitchell from Texas, with the wild card here, one of either Xavier Worthy and Ladd McConkey will get selected. We will have exactly 6 wide receivers in the first round tonight. This is one of the best wide receiver drafts we've had in a long, long time. And I think we're going to see the value of that position tonight. How many of them pan out? That's going to be a fun one to see if time will tell. I think a majority of them do. More so than not. I think they'll bat a little better than the 27% that GMs have been drafting from 2000 to 2019 when it comes to them getting second contracts. But one name I didn't mention was Xavier Legette. Not saying Xavier Legette's not first round worthy. Not at all. I just don't think he goes in the first round. I think other teams value someone like Xavier Worthy, who wowed people in the Underwear Olympics, also known as the NFL Draft Combine, the Scouting Combine. I think his speed wowed a lot of people to where Xavier Worthy really shot up some draft boards. And maybe did so at the expense of someone like Xavier Legette. So my 4th proclamation is that Xavier Legette won't be selected tonight, but will be the first selection tomorrow. He will not get past 33. I feel solid about that because the Panthers need a receiver. Look, you traded DJ Moore. You brought in Adam Thielen, who's a little past his prime. You need somebody to be the primary pass catcher for Bryce Young. Is that the best spot for Xavier Legette? I'm not sure in terms of optimizing his success, maximizing his potential. But I have a hard time believing that if Legette goes out of the first round and the Carolina Panthers are there at pick 33, that they let him slide past them. I doubt it. Feel pretty good about that one. And number 5, lastly, tonight Brock Bowers will be a New York Jet. The Jets added a lot of help on the outside with Mike Williams in free agency. They got their left tackle in Tyron Smith from Dallas, their right tackle with Moses Morgan from Baltimore. The defense has been loaded for the last couple of years, and that's not any different than anything. You got more loaded this offseason when they signed Hassan Reddick and Javon Kinlaw. The defense is a strength. The roster's really good. You don't have much of great Aaron Rodgers left. Honestly, after an Achilles injury, I don't know of how much good Aaron Rodgers you have left. You got to be able to optimize the offense, give him as many weapons as possible. Garrett Wilson, really good receiver. You need more pass-catching threats with him to help him out. Look, Aaron Rodgers would love, and I'm sure he'd even love, a first-round pick to be able to throw the ball to, because out of all the touchdown passes he's thrown in his career, and there are many of them, only one player was a first-round draft pick. That was Mercedes Lewis. I think Brock Bowers is going to be able to join that club, make that a party of 2, because tonight I highly doubt that Brock Bowers slips out of the top 10 if he's there available. I think the Jets take him. They should take him, and I think they will, because I think they're probably looking at it through a similar scope. However, the Jets are the Jets, and sometimes the Jets are just going to jet. So we'll see if they jet or not, or make the smart move and draft Brock Bowers at number 10. One more segment to get to before we close out hour number 1. We get to your calls on the other side as well. It's our draft day preview extravaganza here on the Postgame Show, and that continues after this. That's right. You're listening to the Postgame Show. Elijah Campbell here. No Jay Phillips today. He's got the rest of the week off. Talking a lot of NFL draft right now. And in the next hour, we're going to get into the big weekend baseball series. I'm not going to completely label it as an anxiety series because anxiety series usually involve both teams that have equal levels of anxiety. But if you're South Carolina, this is your best chance to be able to snag a series win against a team in the top 10 nationally and a team that's in the top 3 in the RPI. That's going to be really big. I think they can do it. I actually think they should. I'll tell you why in the next hour. But right now, still talking NFL draft. First round is tonight. I gave out my 5 first-round draft proclamations, and one of those was that Xavier Legette will not hear his name called tonight. I'd love for him to hear him have his name called tonight. The work that guy's put in to go from special teams specialist to number 1 wide receiver and put up insane numbers and become a human highlight reel last year and really be the highlight of the season for South Carolina is impressive. He's a very likable player, likable person to talk to. Would love to see him drafted in the first round and not miss out on that first round NFL draft money, most importantly. But I do, if I had to make a prediction, which we do in this industry, oftentimes not very well, but that's not the point. I do think he is the number 33 overall pick. And honestly, it's not a bad spot if the team before you is able to pick in the first round, or if the team that you get drafted to is able to pick in the first round. The Panthers do not have that luxury. I liken back to the 2020 draft where Joe Burrow was taken number 1 overall, and at 33, they took T. Higgins to be his top receiver. And that worked out pretty well. Then the next year they drafted Jamar Chase. The rest is history. The Bengals ended up going to a Super Bowl. That pick number 33 can be pretty valuable. And if you're the Panthers, look, the defense is solid, and you didn't lose a ton. Brian Burns obviously hurts, but you'd like to be able to replace that production, but you maybe have to do so in the aggregate. But I think they get Xavier Legette. But when it comes to Gamecock players like Xavier Legette and Spencer Rattler, there are places that I think have the best fit for them. Spoiler alert, I want to give those out right now, and the Carolina Panthers will not be the best fit for Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette's the best fit for the Carolina Panthers, but I don't think that works both ways. Mostly because in some of the mock drafts I've seen, so I like to keep it in the realm of possibility here. A couple weeks ago, Mel Kiper did have Xavier Legette being selected 27th overall to the Detroit Lions. And out of all the places I've seen Xavier Legette mocked, I think that is the best fit for him for a multitude of reasons. Look, there's no pressure to be the number 1 wide receiver. In our 5 o'clock news segment yesterday, went over the news that broke of Amon-Ra St. Brown getting signed to a pretty large contract. He's only one of 3 players in the history of the NFL to have 90 receptions in his first 3 seasons, the other 2 being Michael Thomas and Cooper Kupp. Amon-Ra St. Brown's pretty good. He's the clear number 1 on this team. There's another deep threat in Jamison Williams. While he has underachieved a little bit given his draft position and some of the trouble he's gotten into in terms of gambling, it's been a little bit of a disappointment, but there's still some talent there, and they still find ways to use him in different ways. He's a really good downfield threat if they can get him to do it more consistently, but if you add Xavier Legette to that mix, look, that Lions offense would be clicking. They got a multifaceted offense with a strong offensive line. Look, they also signed Penei Sewell to an extension as well. He's one of the best offensive linemen in the league right now. You can help develop those plays downfield with a good offensive line. You have a good quarterback. Jared Goff's not a great quarterback, but he's a good quarterback. And these other weapons alleviate the pressure and the looks that he's going to be able to contribute. He's also going to be a weapon on special teams. And look, if you're the Lions, this benefits you well too, because not only do you add an extra weapon to the offense to add with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta at tight end, Jahmyr Gibbs, who's a good pass-catching running back out of the backfield. You also get you a kick and punt returner, especially a kick returner. Xavier Legette, obviously we saw what he did against Texas A&M at Williams-Brice just a couple seasons ago. He can take it to the house, and he's no stranger of taking it to the house, almost like he's got keys. But he's going to be an upgrade over Khalil Dorsey and Khalif Raymond. Both of those guys. He'd be an upgrade in terms of special teams prowess. I think it's going to be very beneficial if the Lions end up selecting him in the first round. And I think that would be the most beneficial place for X to be able to go and benefit right away and be able to assimilate and contribute to a really good contending football team. Lastly, Spencer Rattler talked a lot about how it would benefit him if he paired up with Sean Payton in Denver, but I think the Raiders might be a better fit. Look, they got a better core of weapons. I think Devontae Adams is still one of the best receivers in the NFL. I'd still take him over Cortland Sutton. No disrespect to Cortland Sutton, but Devontae Adams is an elite-level route runner to this day. They have an up-and-coming coach. I like Antonio Pierce, and I think he gets guys to play for him really well. He's a good motivator. Guys love playing for him. And there's less organizational pressure to win right away. The Broncos have been in win-now mode for a couple of years now, and now that the Russell Wilson experiment failed, there's going to be a little more pressure. He's going to have a quarterback competition that is winnable while also getting the best out of him with Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. So I think the Las Vegas Raiders might actually end up being the best fit for Spencer Rattler. More draft stuff, Gamecock baseball preview, big series against Kentucky, all that and more in the second hour of the postgame show. Hour number 2 of the post-game show starts right now. I'm Elijah Campbell taking you up to 6 o'clock. No Jay Phillips today. I'll be taking you up to 6 o'clock tomorrow as well, which will lead into the first of 3 games against the Kentucky Wildcats. Gamecock baseball taking action at Founders Park. 6:45 pregame tomorrow, 7 o'clock first pitch. Saturday, 3:45 pregame, 4 o'clock first pitch. And then on Sunday, 1:45 p.m. pregame, first pitch, around 2 o'clock. And look, this is a big series. This is a massive, massive series because the opportunity that presents itself is pretty big for RPI purposes, for your chances to climb up the ladder in the SEC standings. Because, look, it's not going to get easier from here on out. It's going to be pretty hard. You just got done playing the number 2 team in the country in Arkansas. A top 10 Kentucky team that just now lost their first series of the season is coming into town. And this team's also, Kentucky, top 3 in RPI. And if you look at the schedule the rest of the way, you still have a couple of 3-game sets against some of the best teams in the entire conference, or at least some of the best players. After this, you have the ETSU in the midweek, but then a weekend series at Missouri. Missouri is not very good, obviously, but they can be a little tricky at home. They have tripped up some people in Como this year. You want to make sure you do not fall victim to the Como trap. And then the next weekend, you have a home series against Georgia. Georgia, kind of similar to you. I think you're probably a better baseball team overall than Georgia, but they're 9-9. And they got Charlie Condon, who some believe will be a top 3 pick in the MLB draft. And he's been hitting moonshot home runs this year for Georgia. Georgia has been absolutely raking at the plate, which makes them dangerous regardless. But you still have a home series against Georgia, and then you round out the season having to go to Lindsey Nelson Stadium in Knoxville and play the Tennessee Vols, who, by the way, took 2 of 3 in Lexington, Kentucky last week, and they are a team that's on the rise and playing their best baseball of the season. So the road's not getting any easier. And outside of Missouri, this is the most winnable series you have. Like, wait, Elijah, this Kentucky team's top 10. Yes, they are top 10, but I think this could be a very winnable series for a multitude of reasons. Looking at this Kentucky team, I like to see exactly what teams do particularly well and what they don't necessarily do well. And the consensus that I got for Kentucky is that they're a solid team. Look, they're not hitting a ton of home runs, and they're not raking in a ton of RBI. They're 8th in the conference in home runs, so a little below average in terms of SEC teams. Only 7th in total bases. They're 8th in hits, but they are 4th in on-base percentage. They get on base a lot, and they rarely strike out. They're 13th in terms of just number of strikeouts in the league. They're always putting that ball in play, and they force you to have to be able to play well in the field. And it's not even close in terms of how little they strike out. For instance, they only struck out 286 times so far this season. South Carolina struck out 406. Pretty big gap, right? South Carolina does strike out a lot. Kentucky doesn't. That can cause some issues. That can be tough. And here's the thing. If Will Tippett's not 100%, it's going to be really hard to win the series because, like I said, they do put a lot of pressure on you to be able to have to make plays, right? And last weekend, Lee Ellis saw time at shortstop. And granted, he's not Will Tippett. But he's going to have to be able to play really well in the field if he's playing this weekend. Mark Kingston on Monday, when he was on the show, was asked about Will Tippett. And here's what he said to give kind of the latest on Will.
Will Tippett has the concussion that everybody knows about, but on the same play, he actually sprained his MCL as well, if you can believe that. So he's going to be out for the time being. We don't know how long yet. We're hoping to have him back, in a few weeks. But because of that, Lee Ellis will now get run at shortstop, and he played well this weekend.
So Lee Ellis will be getting the run at shortstop. And look, there's going to be some balls hit his way. Kentucky's not going to strike out. They're not going to hand you outs, right? But what makes you feel good is that they're not incredibly explosive. They are about as anti-modern baseball as it gets. They don't live and die on the three true outcomes of walks, home runs, strikeouts, but they put a lot of balls in play. They got a couple of hitters who have really good batting averages. Nick Lopez is hitting almost 400 this year. He's, top 5 in the SEC in batting average. He's hitting 386. Ryan Waldschmidt is top 5 in the league in on-base percentage, and he's got an OPS that's over 1,100. Pretty solid. And they steal a lot of bases, too. Another modern baseball principle is not stealing a lot of bases. But Kentucky tries a lot. They lead the SEC in stolen base attempts and successful stolen bases. They're pretty good. And they get caught sometimes, too. Pitching, they're fine. They have a solid pitching staff. But it's not an overwhelming pitching staff. But like they're hitting, they don't commit a lot of mistakes, right? They don't walk a ton. They're 4th in the SEC in fewest walks allowed, and they don't give up a lot of home runs. 2nd in terms of fewest home runs allowed. And they're 3rd in the league in fielding double plays, which, by the way, South Carolina is number 1 in that category. So don't be surprised when you go to Founders Park this weekend that you see a lot of double plays being flipped by both teams. Look, the ball's going to be kept in the yard. They do a pretty good job of that. And they're going to be able to try to field and get you out. They don't make a ton of mistakes. They play simple baseball. But I think that plays into your hands, too. Not only is this a winnable series, this is a series you should win. Because if you want to end the season above 500 in SEC play, this is a team that doesn't have that explosiveness that can really get you out of a game really quick, right? They don't have a pitching staff like Arkansas that is absurdly dominant, or Texas A&M that's absurdly dominant. They don't have a hitting lineup like Tennessee, even though they did score a lot of runs against Tennessee in that last game specifically, but where they're just going to tee off on you and hit a ton of home runs and hit for a lot of power. They don't have that. They're solid. They don't have a ton of obvious weaknesses, but they're not overwhelmingly better at one thing that can get you out of a baseball game. So look, this is a big series for a lot of reasons, for SEC standing implications, to improve your resume in the RPI. Because look, Kentucky's number 3 right now. This is obviously quad 1 opportunity. You're 10-11 in quad 1 games. And to give you a comparison, out of all the teams that are in the top 20, there are only a handful of teams that have 10 wins. You're technically tied for 2nd for most quad 1 wins out of teams in the top 20, Kentucky being 1st at 13-2. Lastly, in terms of what Kentucky does on the diamond, what their resume is, look, they're 32-7 on the season. They have a 13-2 road record, which on the surface looks really, really good. But they haven't been tested a ton on the road in this conference. The only teams they've played on the road in this conference in terms of series is Auburn, Ole Miss, and Missouri. None of those teams have records over 500, and Missouri and Auburn, I think, have been the consensus 2 worst teams in the conference this season. Ole Miss started off pretty good, but they're below 500. This Kentucky team is 4-2 against teams in the conference that are over 500 in league play, or at 500 or over in league play. 4-2. And those games are Georgia and Tennessee. Both of those series were at home. And Tennessee took 2 of 3. They swept Georgia very early on in the conference slate. I'm not saying this Kentucky team's overrated. I think there's just room for some natural regression because they've had some schedule luck. You're getting them after they finally got beat in a series for the first time since the first week of March when they dropped 2 of 3 against Kennesaw State. The Kentucky Wildcats didn't lose a series since. You're pretty comparable with them in terms of baseball teams. I don't think they're head and shoulders better than South Carolina. I really don't, even though they are 15-3 in the conference and South Carolina's 9-9. Even if they are 3 in RPI and South Carolina's 13. At home, I expect the Gamecocks to win this series. And you're not going to feel very good about yourself if you end up dropping 2 of 3 or, heaven forbid, getting swept by this Kentucky team. Not something you want. 803-404-6100, taking your calls, talking a lot of Gamecocks baseball. And my man Thad called in the last hour and wanted to get in. He had a question about spring football. And, of course, I'm not going to turn down a question about spring football. Gamecock football, obviously, big deal. Spring game was this Saturday. We're all still trying to digest it and figure out what exactly we've learned about this team so far. So we'll go ahead and get to Thad right now. Thad, thanks for calling, man. What you got?
question I had was on what was said after the spring game. And Bakari Swain was asked a question in his conference, or in his news conference afterwards, his interview. They asked him who had taken the biggest jump in quarterback and in wide receiver, and he made mention certainly of Lenore Sellers as well as Robbie Ashford, but then he went into wide receivers. And two that really stood out in the spring game, just by the eye test, was both Mazio Bennett as well as Tyshawn Russell. Mm-hmm. But then he didn't make mention of either one of those two. Who he made mention of first was Elijah Caldwell, who we heard a lot about last fall, but ever since then he's just kind of went away in the shadows. And Gage Lardane, and the other, I believe, was Bruce, Amari Bruce. He made mention of their speed, but he talked about Elijah Caldwell's hands. He said he has amazing hands. But he didn't just mention them once. He mentioned them again the second time. And he said those three are really going to help out our team. I'm just wondering if there's been anything said. One of the things that I see in his measurables is that Elijah is 6'1", and what they have him registered at is about 195 pounds. Big body, pretty big wide receiver if those measurables are correct. A lot of times there's some fluctuation there. When it says 6'1", you can almost imagine him to be 5'11", 6 foot.
Yeah, your height and your program height are always a little different.
Right.
I contend to that.
Right.
Nationally.
Have you heard anything on Elijah?
Personally, no, but thank you for the call, Thad. But that's what's interesting too, right? If a player mentions that unprompted about a player, you believe them, right? Because they're the ones that go against him in practice every day. That's why whenever The Athletic puts out like anonymous player polls, I am flocking to it, right? Like this past week they added, or they had an anonymous player poll that they've been taking throughout the season in the NBA, and I'm a big NBA guy. I'm fascinated to hear what players have to say about other players when unprompted and when they're anonymous, to kind of have the freedom to be as transparent and be as honest as possible. Because that's when you know how good somebody really is, if they're giving their opponent hell out there. You don't want to be the player that other players want to play against, right? You want to be the one they dread playing against. So when Bakari Swain says that about Elijah Caldwell, that's promising. That's 2 thumbs up. Look, the obvious guys in the spring game, like you mentioned, Thad, Mazio Bennett, I thought had a solid spring game. Ran a really good route, caught a nice pass in the first half of that game. It's promising. Gage Lardane got a few targets here and there. There was some promise there. I thought Tyshawn Russell caught the ball well, which for him last year was a little bit of a struggle. He had a little bit of a case of the dropsies. But seeing Tyshawn Russell catch the ball and make some moves after the play, after the catch, is encouraging. But to hear an opposing cornerback on your team, unprompted, give someone like Elijah Caldwell a shout out in terms of being hard to play against is really promising. Have I been hearing anything about him, cracking the starting lineup and getting, 5 or 6 targets a game? Nothing like that. But if you're hearing other players unprompted say stuff like that, then you have to feel pretty good that that player's coming along. And if it doesn't happen this year, it could definitely happen next year, because there is a little bit of a logjam at receiver right now, and guys are trying to create separation. And you have a lot of older transfer players in there, so that can make causing separation very difficult for somebody like Elijah Caldwell, who's definitely one of the younger players in that wide receiver room. Encouraging? Yes. Does it mean a lot for this year? Not quite, but it can be very promising moving forward if he sticks with this program and is able to develop furthermore, and then maybe he can help you down the road. We'll continue with the Gamecock football, baseball discussion, all of that. We have a group of 5 college football discussion to get into later on. And is ESPN flubbing odds for the NFL draft? I'll get into all that and more as the postgame show continues. Look, a lot of talk about the draft tonight, and rightfully so, but there's some other things that you can enjoy tonight in the sports world, like the hockey playoffs, the basketball playoffs, and you can get in on that action with my friends at Prize Picks, because Prize Picks is the #1 fantasy sports app in America. All you got to do, pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. Watch those winnings roll in. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. They even offer injury insurance so that if a player gets hurt in the first half of the game and doesn't return, which happens a lot with players like Anthony Davis or Joel Embiid, then you know what? You're insured. It's not going to count you as a loss. Tonight, I'm really excited to be able to put a little something on Nikola Jokic, rebounds plus assist, whatever that projection total is. I'm going more on because that guy is an absolute monster, and never bet against Nikola Jokic in anything. Just download the app today, use 1075GAME as a promo code, and match deposit up to $100. That's promo code 1075GAME. Keep listening here on the Postgame Show, here this hour, and we'll give you an opportunity to win tickets to the South Carolina, Kentucky baseball, or some games this series at the Diamond, if I can speak, over at Founders Park. Got a couple pair of tickets to give away. It's going to be for Game 3, so it's going to be Sunday. That game, the pregame show, can be heard here on 107.5 The Game. Looks like it says 1:45 baseball pregame. The tickets here say 3 o'clock first pitch, so that might be 2:45 on Sunday. But we have 2 tickets to give away for Sunday. Keep listening in this hour, and you could be a lucky caller and win said tickets. And if you do, you'll enjoy the game because these are 2 really good baseball teams. And Kentucky's solid. Obviously, you're not top 3 in the RPI. You're not top 10 in the polls in the country if you're not a really good baseball team. Even if you are overachieving a little bit, which I will accuse Kentucky of some slight overachieving. But this is a very winnable series because there's 3 things that this Gamecock team I know can do to ultimately win the series. Number 1, you're going to have to display some plate discipline. Look, in the last segment, I kind of broke down some of the strengths and weaknesses of this Kentucky team, whether it be at the plate or on the mound, and they just don't do a lot of the really frustrating stuff that loses you games. At the bat, they don't strike out a ton. On the mound, they don't walk a ton of players. They don't make a lot of mistakes in the field. They've got a good unit of players who can flash the leather and make things happen and create outs when they need to. But for South Carolina, who has a little bit of a reputation here of striking out a lot, you got to be disciplined at the plate. Look, they're not going to strike out a ton, or Kentucky's not going to strike you out a ton unless you swing at bad pitches or you have bad plate approach. You got to be able to allow them to pitch you something to hit and put it in play and put the onus on them defensively to throw you out or to make a play in the field, whether it be in the outfield, infield, whatever. A way to put pressure on them will just be to put the ball in play. Sometimes the best thing you can do, outs can be categorized differently, right? I think South Carolina's going to have their fair share of base runners. I don't think this is like an Arkansas situation where you're scratching and clawing against someone like Hagen Smith just to get on base, right? It's not going to be like that. Or you're not going to go through stretches of the game where base runners are going to be at a premium because the Arkansas pitching staff and the Kentucky pitching staff are 2 completely different animals. Kentucky's still good. They still got some good pitchers who have good ERAs, who got really good opponent batting averages. They take care of business. But none of these guys are over 1 strikeout per inning guys. None of them are. They don't have insane strikeout rates, and they're middle of the pack when it comes to striking out batters in the SEC and in SEC play. So they're going to give you stuff to hit. You got to be able to put bat on ball and be able to force them to have to make really good plays. Make them earn all those outs to be able to keep you off the scoreboard. This also leads to having to be able to hit well situationally. If you get runners on second and third, 1 out, you got to be able to put the ball in play. A strikeout's one of the worst things that can happen. You can't be a high strikeout team against Kentucky, specifically. You got to be able to put the bat on the ball. It's going to be likely, because like I said, they don't strike out a ton of batters on the mound. So you got to be able to take advantage of that and be able to put some pressure on them. Number 2, take care of business in the field yourself. Look, we heard the clip from Coach Mark Kingston. Will Tippett not going to be available. We're going to see a lot of Lee Ellis this weekend. Whole lot of Lee Ellis. And that ball is going to be hit to Lee Ellis a lot. South Carolina leads the SEC in double plays turned. And a lot of that is because Parker Nolan at second base and Will Tippett at short have been phenomenal at flipping double plays. Turning 2 has been one of the most fun things about this baseball team this year is their ability to turn a double play at any time. Anytime a team gets a runner on, it's always a threat to be a double play because of those guys right there. Lee Ellis has to step in. And yeah, I thought Lee Ellis hit the ball pretty well, admirably, last weekend against a really good Arkansas pitching staff. And that's great. And if he gets you, a couple hits at the bottom of your order, that's fantastic. That's the type of production you need. But you got to be able to fill in some pretty big shoes over at short. And that's where I'm excited to see if Lee Ellis is able to step up to that challenge and be able to make sure that he makes the plays whenever they're hit to him. Because, again, Kentucky does not strike out a lot. They don't do a lot of the stuff that a lot of modern baseball teams do in terms of the 3 true outcomes. They put the ball in play really well, and they get on base really well. So the ball is going to find Lee Ellis. The ball is going to find Talmadge LeCroy at third. The ball is going to find Parker Nolan at second. Nolan and LeCroy have shown this year that they're able to make plays at those positions, especially Nolan. But Lee Ellis is going to be the one that stepped in there. Is going to have to step in there and raise his game a little bit to be able to make some plays in the field and help you manufacture some outs yourself. So that's number 2. Number 1, plate discipline. 2, take care of business in the field. And 3, this is the most fascinating one, because I alluded to it a little bit in that first segment of this hour when talking about this series. Kentucky loves to steal bases. They love to try to steal bases. They lead the SEC in stolen base attempts by a wide margin. They've attempted 102 thefts of the bags so far this season. 102 attempts at stealing a base. They are successful in a good amount of them, enough to lead the league in stolen bases. And the second closest team in terms of just attempted stolen bases is Vanderbilt at 85. It's a pretty big jump. We're talking about like a 17 attempt jump between number 1 and number 2 in the SEC in terms of trying to steal bases. Kentucky's going to try. And whether it's Cole Messina back there behind the plate, or if it's Dalton Reeves and Cole Messina is hitting DH, doesn't matter, vice versa. It'll be up to Cole Messina or Dalton Reeves to be able to make some plays and throw some guys out. Because Kentucky's going to try to steal on you. That is a given. That is a promise. They're going to attempt to swipe some bags. They get on base, which they do pretty frequently. Again, top 4 in the conference on on-base percentage. They're going to put some pressure on you to throw them out on the base paths. So this is an awesome challenge for somebody like Cole Messina. Or if Cole ends up in the DH for, the Saturday or Sunday game, for Dalton Reeves to get back there and show that he can't be run on. They're going to try to run on you. You got to be able to help manufacture outs by keeping them from swiping bags on you. Because if they're able to do that with regularity, they're going to be able to put some runners in scoring position. And with their on-base percentage being what it is, you got to feel decent enough about them being able to take advantage and hit well with runners in scoring position and bring said runners home. If that happens, then you put yourself behind the 8 ball against a pretty good team that does a pretty good job of not beating themselves. That's not a position you want to be in. And if you want to avoid being in that position, got to throw them out. Because like I said, Kentucky's going to try to run on you. If you want to see this game in person, or one of these games in person, on Sunday, game on Sunday, 3 o'clock, be callers number 5 and 6 right now, 803-404-6100. Callers 5 and 6 will get a pair of tickets to see the Gamecocks and Wildcats on Sunday. Good luck. Wait for the phone lines to blow up. And again, callers 5 and 6. That number is 803-404-6100. Is ESPN using their new betting partners to flub some odds and create some public doubt over a certain prop bet? I'll discuss on the other side as the postgame show continues. From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to get to you that are causing some delays on the roadways this afternoon. Not many, thankfully, so that's the good news. But we do have one on Gervais Street near Hughes E Street. You're close to downtown. We also have another one on Hayward-Brockington Road at Monticello Road. And lastly, in Richland County, I have one on Rabin Road at Faro Road. Only one to report, too, from Lexington County. Over near West Columbia, it looks like an accident on US 321 at I-26 is causing some traffic backup. On this program, Jay Phillips and I like to joke a lot about the power of the mouse. Mickey Mouse, the four-letter network, ESPN. They are the worldwide leader in sports, and they are for a reason. They're pretty good at what they do, and they have been for a long time. But something I don't want to say is nefarious or completely accused of nefarious activity, but it feels funny, smells a little bit. Right? Something's a little uncomfortable. Something's a little off about this. It just feels weird, even in today's modern sports media landscape where sports gambling is now more embraced than it's ever been. It went from, subtle innuendo with Brett Musburger, calling games about certain point spreads or certain drives at the end of a football game, maybe being significant for some, whether it be relating to a point spread or the total. An over-under, if you will. But ESPN has embraced gambling, like a lot of, the modern sports world, and they even have their own sports book, ESPN Bet. And they, anytime you go on ESPN, you're watching a show like First Take or Get Up, you're looking at odds that they're giving to you. Because clearly ESPN Bet is the official sports book of ESPN. Duh. But they're the ones providing the odds for a lot of things. And for those who are familiar with how a lot of this works, whether it be point spreads or just odds for anything, because you can bet on anything, and a lot of people bet on the NFL draft. Odds can change because of rumor and innuendo, basically. It's all value-based, and the whole point, and Jay does a really good job of discussing this whenever we're both on and talking, that it's designed to separate you from your money. There's a reason they call it Caesar's Palace and not Caesar's Hut. It's really nice because they win a lot. And ESPN, with partnering with sportsbooks, not only wants to engage with the sports bettor to consume more of their product, they want to get in on that winning too. They really want to get in on that winning action. So when you look at something like what has happened over the course of the last week in regards to the odds for the Chargers to draft a quarterback for their first pick. Now, clear distinction to be made here. It's not the pick that they're drafting. So I believe they're at 5. And if the Chargers are at 5, the bet doesn't go. So if the Chargers trade out of it and the Vikings want to trade up, like I think they will, to get J.J. McCarthy, and they trade into that 5th spot and draft McCarthy or a quarterback with that 5th pick, does not count. It's who the Chargers take with their first pick, whether it's at 5 where they're supposed to start or whether it's at 50 if they trade back for a bunch of picks. Wherever their first pick is, what positions are going to be. You can gamble on that. Well, when these odds opened up, the odds for the Chargers to take a quarterback opened up at 100 to 1. Those are pretty steep odds. Pretty steep. You're not feeling good about a bet cashing in if you're betting on it 100 to 1. But as time has gone on, it's gone down a little bit and more and more and more. And by Tuesday, what was once a 100 to 1 odds for the Chargers to draft a quarterback has dipped down to 15 to 1. Interesting, right? Well, then over the course from Tuesday to now, because now they have dropped down to 6-1, the Chargers drafting a quarterback. Now, this wouldn't be odd, no pun intended, if it was a team like the Broncos drafting a quarterback first overall. Makes sense, right? As of right now, they have Zach Wilson, Jarrett Stidham, and Ben DiNucci on the roster. Don't think you feel pretty good about either of those guys being your day one or week one starter. So it would make sense, right, for word to get around that the Broncos are going to want a quarterback. They're going to take one. More than likely in this draft, I think they'd take it in the third round with Spencer Rattler. That's beside the point. But the Chargers? Justin Herbert? One of the promising young quarterbacks in the entire league? You already have him on your team. Are you going to trade him? Are you going to try to draft a quarterback to replace him, to maybe get under a salary cap, whatever it may be? It's just odd because it doesn't make sense. ESPN has clearly played a role in these odds coming down, because if they start talking about it and they start pushing it, they start pushing something that might sound like the Chargers are legitimately interested in taking a quarterback, whether it's incredibly true or not, that's going to have effect on those gambling lines and those odds, right? The reason that it went from 100-1 down to 6-1 is because a lot of people are starting to put money on the Chargers to take a quarterback with their first pick. And what ESPN doesn't want to do, or ESPN Bet, the certain entity, which is partnered with, a third party, what they don't want to do is lose a lot of money. So to mitigate that risk, they are going to lower the odds to discourage people betting on the value. But so many people have done it now, and now it's keep getting discussed about the Chargers, possibly taking a quarterback, all this type of stuff. Jim Harbaugh did say months ago that J.J. McCarthy's the best quarterback in the draft, which you should you expect him to say that because that was his quarterback. He coached him. That's his guy. Of course he's going to say that. But should that fuel odds to go from 101 down to 6-1? ESPN does play a little bit of a role in it, whether it's nefarious or not. And one of two things are at play here. There are two explanations to this, and both of them are dumb. One, there's some market manipulation going on with their sports gambling partners and creating noise that's loud enough to push odds to a certain line. Because after all, odds are mostly market and rumor fueled to win money and separate you from said money. Or, number two, the other possible reality at play here. The Chargers are actually looking to draft a quarterback, specifically J.J. McCarthy, and they will do the unthinkable and trade Justin Herbert as he's getting into his prime. I highly doubt it's number two. It could be, because you never say never. Weird stuff happens all the time. Look, I worked in an NFL market on a draft day and was working and doing draft day coverage the day the Tennessee Titans went from rumored to possibly shopping A.J. Brown, rumored to not being enthused about paying more than $22 million a year for his contract, rumors and possible reports that the Titans are shopping him. It went from rumored to being pretty darn real really fast. It snowballed quickly. It went from ending a midday radio show with, there's rumors that John Robinson's thinking about trading A.J. Brown because of the potential future price tag on his contract extension, and that he might not be happy with the Titans' unwillingness to meet that number. It went from that to, in the middle of the first round, Roger Goodell goes up to the podium and says the Tennessee Titans have made a trade. They are trading, A.J. Brown to the Philadelphia Eagles for these picks, which eventually turned into Treylon Burks. That, I've seen it happen before, and at the time, I thought it was unthinkable that you traded your number one wide receiver to take a risk and a gamble on an unproven rookie to fill that slot and try to recreate that production. Ultimately, that was the downfall of John Robinson. He got fired because decisions like that get GMs fired. And coaches, Mike Vrabel, also got fired 1 year after John Robinson did. Trading Justin Herbert to draft J.J. McCarthy is what gets general managers removed from their positions. And I don't think Harbaugh is one of those guys to look at a quarterback like Justin Herbert, who has all the talent in the world, haven't put it together around him yet. And there's still some flaws in his game. And that's why you bring in a coach like Jim Harbaugh to be able to fix some of those flaws in Justin Herbert. All of that makes it so unlikely for the Chargers to actually end up doing that and drafting a quarterback so they could trade Justin Herbert. Which leads me to believe that more than likely out of these two scenarios that are at play here, that number one of the market manipulation is very possible. And this isn't unprecedented either. Look, Shams Charania from The Athletic also has a partnership. He's a really good reporter. Him and Woj, Adrian Wojnarowski for ESPN, have an awesome, breaking news rivalry. They try to outdo each other every NBA free agency. And it's fun to watch because both those guys are the best of the best at their jobs. They are legitimate insiders and reporters. And Shams last summer, before the NBA draft, tweeted out about the Hornets being really interested in Scoot Henderson. It's looking really likely that they want Scoot Henderson. And sure enough, Scoot Henderson's odds to be the number 2 pick in the NBA draft soared. Absolutely soared. A lot of people are putting in a lot of money for Scoot Henderson to be the 2nd pick in the NBA draft because Shams reported it and tweeted it. Shams also has a deal with FanDuel, which is a sports book. He has a deal with them. They are business partners. He doesn't just work for The Athletic. He also works for FanDuel. Those odds got out of control. And you know what the Charlotte Hornets did not do? That's right. You can probably guess. They did not draft Scoot Henderson. Instead, they drafted Brandon Miller. And a lot of people were separated from their money that afternoon. Are we seeing something similar here with ESPN? Don't know for 100% certainty, but it certainly feels like these are inflated odds. And there's a little bit of fluff here to get certain odds to a certain point to create maybe some certain action on a certain prop. We'll see if the Chargers do the unthinkable or if a lot of people are going to get separated from their money. We'll close out hour number 2 of today's show going into the final 5 o'clock hour as the afternoon show. Wow, I pulled a Jay Phillips. As the postgame show continues. It's a story I didn't get to yesterday, but I'm going to get to today because this is really funny. Look, one of the hardest things to do in life, in any situation, is saying sorry, right? We're not all really good at apologizing. I'm not the best at it. Got to work on it. Peter Cetera said it's really hard to say sorry. And a lot of people say sorry and they apologize for certain things in different ways. But Kyle Ford, who was a former Southern Cal wide receiver, who did what used to be maybe 25, 30 some odd years ago, before the age of NIL and the transfer portal, would have been the unthinkable. And that is transfer from Southern Cal right down the road to arch rival UCLA. I'm pretty sure Southern Cal fans not thrilled about that at all. And rightfully so. I totally get it. I understand the fan vitriol that occurs when a player transfers from the school you love to a rival school. Like, what if, a South Carolina player, receiver, ends up transferring to Clemson? Gamecock Nation would not be very thrilled. I would know who their least favorite player is after that. Without a doubt, I would know exactly who their least favorite player would be. And the booing that would happen every time said player touched the ball whenever they would play here at Williams-Brice. I get it. There's some vitriol there. And there have been some instances. Obviously, Henry To'oTo'o comes to mind, a former Tennessee linebacker who then transferred to Alabama to play. Or in basketball, just recently, Aiden Holloway, former five-star McDonald's All-American point guard who played this past season at Auburn, announced he's going to transfer to Alabama. The Inner Iron Bowl transfer. Doesn't happen frequently, but there's going to be a certain amount of vitriol towards that player. Right or wrong, doesn't matter. It's going to happen. It's going to exist. And Kyle Ford probably experienced that last season when he entered the transfer portal and left Southern Cal to go to UCLA. He's got 1 year of eligibility left, and after the year UCLA had, he got in the transfer portal again, obviously. There are some circumstances around the Bruins football program that aren't what I would say as desirable. They weren't very good. Chip Kelly, didn't get fired. But if they didn't beat Southern Cal on the last day of the season, he probably would have been fired. Or second to last week of the season. He probably would have been fired. But Chip Kelly saw the writing on the wall, so he dipped to be the OC at Ohio State. Kyle Ford probably saw that writing on the wall too, so he gets in the transfer portal again. I didn't coin the term boomerang transfer, but I use it a lot. Kyle Ford is a very special kind of boomerang transfer. For instance, Austin Stogner for Oklahoma. Transferred from Oklahoma here to South Carolina. Played a year at South Carolina, went back to Oklahoma. Gilbert Edmond starts his career at South Carolina, transfers to Florida State, comes back to South Carolina. The boomerang transfer is a real thing, but very rarely, and I can't think of an instance off the top of my head, where a boomerang transfer went from one school to hated arch rival school back to original school. And if they'd have, I can't imagine that that it happened with fanfare, right? Like, imagine if South Carolina had a wide receiver who transferred to Clemson, and then they want to come back the next year. How open would you be to accepting that player? And I think a lot of that has to do with how good they actually would be. But Kyle Ford, our boomerang transfer, did announce that he's going to come back to Southern Cal to play for the Trojans in his final year of eligibility. So that's odd. That's a college sports oddity, right? But that's not the news here. That's not what takes the cake. That's not what's so funny about this, is that he was quoted. This is, I'm reading this from at Hayes Fawcett 3 on Twitter. Hayes Fawcett, good reporter for On 3. He tweets, breaking, former Southern Cal wide receiver Kyle Ford, who spent last season at UCLA, is transferring back to Southern Cal, he tells On 3 Sports. The 6'3", 220-pound wide receiver will have 1 year of eligibility remaining. Quote, my fault, I was tripping. #committed. In the day and age of players announcing where they're going on screenshots of the Notepad app on their phone or the Memos app, you know what? There's something kind of charming, funny, and a little refreshing about a player just straight up saying, look, I was tripping. Now I'm #committed. It's funny. There are many different ways to say sorry, especially to a fan base, and especially one like Southern Cal that's got a pretty big fan base. They care about football a lot, even if they don't fill up the Coliseum, which, hey, is probably a little too big for a team to be playing in. But he went to an arch rival, helped an arch rival win some football games. It wasn't like UCLA was winning a ton. But on his way back, just said, look, I'm sorry. I'm tripping. I was tripping. I was wrong. Now Kyle Ford is back and is going to spend his final year of eligibility back with the Trojans. He is no longer tripping. Can confirm. 1 hour left here on the postgame show. We'll get back to some NFL draft discussion. The poll question from earlier about who we think is going to be the best pro quarterback out of all these quarterbacks in the draft. A whole lot more in a drive around the SEC as the postgame show continues. From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to report to you that are causing some delays on the roadways this afternoon. And the good news here is that there's not a ton of them. to get to. Just 3, all here in Richland County. One on Highway 1 at Augusta Road at Taylor Street and Forest Drive. Another one on Pendleton Street near Walnut. And lastly, one on Rabin Road at Farrow Road. All 3 of those causing some slight delay in traffic here in the Midlands. Again, Rabin Road at Farrow Road, one at Pendleton Street near Walnut, and lastly, one on Highway 1 at Augusta Road at Taylor Street and Forest Drive. Well, my friends, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and that somewhere is here. And here on this program, we like to get into the news at 5 o'clock, so let's go ahead and dive into it. The obvious news for tonight is that it's the NFL Draft. The NFL Draft starts tonight on ESPN. The first round will be tonight, second and third rounds tomorrow, and then on Saturday, the rest of the draft will continue. A lot of stuff. We've been breaking it down all day, and the presumed first number 1 overall pick, I think it's a consensus, right? Caleb Williams, quarterback from Southern Cal, appears to be the hands-down favorite to be the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft. And Bruce Feldman, college football reporter for The Athletic and Fox, does a fantastic job with them. Kind of gave a little bit of a breakdown on the situation that Caleb Williams is going to enter once he gets to Chicago.
You know, the guy he's most compared to, obviously, is Patrick Mahomes. But as somebody pointed out to me, Patrick Mahomes went into a very different situation. When he was a rookie, he had Alex Smith, who was a very well-respected, had done it, had been the first pick in the draft, by the way, and had spent a lot of time in the NFL. And then also, the head coach and play caller is Andy Reid. That's not what he's going into in Chicago. Now, it's not to say he can't, you know, turn into a great NFL quarterback, but some of the stuff around him is concerning. Let's put it that way. So,
yeah, that's a good point. I also don't understand the Patrick Mahomes comps either. I guess the one thing that they both do really well is that they're good at improvising. And Caleb Williams, definitely the one thing he does better than anybody else in this draft class in the quarterback position is he improvises really well. The pocket breaks down. He's good at scrambling and making throws happen that might not have been there previously, or that might not have been the design, right, was to make those certain throws. It's going to be interesting to see exactly how well he fits in his first year and what Chicago does to give him help, to put help around him, to be able to put him in the most advantageous situation possible. Because, look, we're going to be honest here. So we are on this show. We want to be as honest as possible. The Chicago Bears history of quarterbacks, really bad, super bad. And I'm not talking about Jonah Hill and Michael Cera. It's super bad. It is awful. The last time they went to a Super Bowl, they were quarterbacked by Rex Grossman. No, not college Rex Grossman, pro Rex Grossman, a guy who in the final week of that season had one of the worst quarterback ratings in the history of football when he threw more passes to the Green Bay Packers than he did his own team. That Rex Grossman. They went to a Super Bowl despite not having a quarterback. They've had quarterback issues. Justin Fields, you thought might be the savior. He might be the guy that can at least be competent to get them back into the playoffs, or at least get him back to what Jay Cutler got him to. Jay Cutler took him to an NFC title game. They won division titles with Jay Cutler. They played really well with Jay Cutler and experienced some interesting heights. But it's not been very good since. It's been pretty ugly since. So what Caleb Williams walks into is going to be a little more difficult than someone like Patrick Mahomes, who got to sit behind Alex Smith for a season and be able to reap the benefits of playing behind a veteran quarterback who can show him the ropes. Because Caleb Williams will be expected to be the man, capital T, capital M, on day one, the minute he walks through those doors for training camp. So that's something to watch for tonight. We'll also be looking to see if, Xavier Legette is drafted in the first round. He has a chance. What would be very surprised if Spencer Rattler goes first round. I'm expecting him to go in the 3rd, 4th round range, but I really do think Leggette's got a very good chance. I think he gets taken in the first pick in tomorrow's 2nd round, but there's a good chance that he gets taken in the 1st. A lot of mocks have him in the 1st. It's something else to watch for. More news here at 5 o'clock. This is news from a tragedy from the NFL from 2016. Former New Orleans Saints star defensive end Will Smith passed away during a confrontation following a car crash and was killed in a road rage incident. Well, the man who killed Will Smith gets a 25-year prison sentence per ESPN and the Associated Press. This is the 2nd time that Cardell Hayes had faced sentencing in Smith's death. He was convicted of manslaughter in December 2016 and later sentenced to 25 years, but the jury vote had been 10-2, and the conviction was later tossed after the U.S. Supreme Court outlawed such non-unanimous verdicts. And then Hayes was released on bail after having served more than 4 years the original sentence. He remained free during multiple retrial days, some due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but he was taken back into custody after the unanimous January 27th verdict and has been awaiting sentencing at the New Orleans jail. So the man who killed Will Smith in a really tragic incident back in 2016 is finally settled, and so he'll be facing 25 years in prison. And some lighter news, and news that might make you feel a little old. It makes me feel a little old reading this headline, and I'm sure it's going to make you feel old hearing it. Charlie Woods, the son of Tiger Woods, shoots an 81 but fails to advance in the U.S. Open qualifier. Per the ESPN News Services, Charlie Woods, the 15-year-old son of Tiger, failed in his first attempt to qualify for a U.S. Open, shooting a 9/81 on Thursday. The team's scorecard included 1 birdie, 4 bogeys, and 3 double bogeys at the Legacy Golf and Tennis Club in Port St. Lucie, Florida. He shot a 40 on the front side and a 41 on the back 9. That was good to finish 61st in a field of 74, and only the top 5 finishers and 2 alternates advanced out of the local qualifying. So young Charlie Woods attempted to qualify for the U.S. Open, was unable to, but look, it's not going to be very long before he ends up actually playing in some of these major tournaments. And who knows? He copies a lot of his dad's mannerisms, and he can play a little bit. I've gotten to see some video clips of Charlie Woods playing, and it probably is only a matter of time before he is actually not just playing in these tournaments, but winning them. On the NBA front, Game 3 between the Bucks and Pacers will be tonight. And Chris Middleton for the Bucks is, according to ESPN, questionable for Game 3 with an ankle injury. Now, for those who've been following along with this series, the Milwaukee Bucks have been without Giannis Antetokounmpo, the 2-time MVP award-winning player for the Bucks and 1-time NBA champion and NBA Finals MVP. He's hurt. They don't know if he's going to be back in this series. Very iffy. And for, a NBA playoff stretch right now where not a lot of road teams are winning. To be honest, only 2 road teams have won so far, and that is the Indiana Pacers in Game 2, and then last night with the Miami Heat, with Eric Spoelstra doing the unthinkable, and without Jimmy Butler winning in Boston against that 64-win Celtics team. Told you, don't bet against them. Don't ever bet against Eric Spoelstra and the Miami Heat if they're down a superstar and they're heavy road underdogs, because for some reason they just win those games. But for the Bucks, bad news. Chris Middleton is technically listed as questionable because of an ankle injury. He was limping around a little bit in the first quarter of their blowout loss to the Pacers at home in Game 2 on, I believe that was Tuesday night. But according to Bucks coach Doc Rivers, he said Middleton didn't practice at all on Thursday and was unsure of the 3-time All-Stars availability for Friday's game. Sorry, misspoke. Friday's game. The game's tomorrow night. But they're unsure. He said, quote, "It's another holding our breath situation. Honestly, I don't know." So that's something to watch for. If you're invested in the NBA playoffs, that's certainly an interesting series as well. Getting into some scores, there was a lot of early baseball today. A lot of early baseball. The Marlins and Braves. Also last night, too, forgot to get to this. We'll rewind it a day. The Atlanta Braves had a little bit of walk-off magic.
The guy he's most compared to.
Didn't mean to do that. Had a little bit of walk-off magic in last night's game against the Florida Marlins.
This is out to left center field. And it gets down.
really good call. Fish fry is complete. Michael Harris drives in Ronald Acuna and walks it off for the Bravos in extra innings. They improved to 17-6 on the season last night. And the fish fry comment actually is really accurate because the Florida Marlins that loss puts them to 6-20 on the season. That's bad. They are a bad baseball team, and the Braves took advantage. So I know Jay Phillips, where he is at right now, is a happy camper with his Atlanta Braves picking up a win over the Marlins. They do not play today, but there's been a lot of action on the diamond here in Major Leagues today. We'll go ahead and start off with my beloved Cincinnati Reds absolutely taking it on the chin, getting beat by the Phillies 5-0. Zach Wheeler gets the win, and the Reds only were able to crank out 3 hits in that game, and I had a feeling that would happen. Zach Wheeler kills the Reds, man. He kills a lot of teams, but he certainly eats up on the Reds. At the end of the 6th inning, the Padres lead the Rockies 6-4. Speaking of bad teams, I mentioned that the Fish were 6-20. The Rockies are on their way to being 6-20, down 2 runs with only a couple innings left. They are 6-19 on the season. The Los Angeles Dodgers are on the road against the Washington Nationals. The Nationals, not as bad as the Marlins. They're a couple of games under 500, but the Dodgers are up 1-0. And there, it looks like in the bottom of the 4th. So still some baseball to be played there. The Brewers beat the Pirates on the road this afternoon, 7-5. They improved to 16-8 on the season, one of the better teams in the NL Central. And then in Cleveland, the Guardians beat the Red Sox 6-4 thanks to a Jose Ramirez grand slam. Puts them up for good. They're 18-7 on the season. They've had a really good start to the year so far. The Minnesota Twins beat the Chicago White Sox 6-3. And we want to talk about bad baseball teams. The Chicago White Sox, man, this loss puts them to 3-22. And I saw a stat the other day that the combined team OPS, on base plus slugging percentage, for the Chicago White Sox is in the mid 500s. It's like 556. Then, of course, for a player, for those who aren't familiar with the stat, for a player, if your OPS is a little over 700, you're considered average. For a player, remember, the entire team's at about 556. The Chicago White Sox are not just bad. My friends, they are comically bad. They are really bad. Almost must-watch TV bad. Because when I see that a team's 3-22, I want to see exactly how bad it is. What does this look like, right? How bad is this? Well, the White Sox are as bad as advertised. They're lost 3-22, taken one by a 6-3 margin against the Twins. The Chicago Cubs got a big win at home today, 16-9 on the season. They beat the Astros 3-1, who have also kind of sunk into a little bit of a problem. They're 7-19. A team that has been so dominant in the last, decade is finally hitting some really bad adversity. They've had a terrible start to the season. And lastly, today the Mariners take down the Texas Rangers on the road by a score of 4-3. Former Red Luis Castillo getting the win. Those are your 5 o'clock headlines, sponsored by Integrated Media. No matter what it is, if you're needing a setup to set up some TV so you can be able to watch the big game, watch the NBA playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs, or even the NFL draft, Integrated Media, the folks to be able to help you get that done. And as always, they sponsored the 5 o'clock news segment. I touched on the draft a little bit. I want to get into it again because there are 2 Gamecocks that obviously the market is interested in. Is Xavier Legette going to be taken in the first round? Yesterday, my man Teron Davenport said he gives him DK Metcalf vibes or A.J. Brown vibes. Do other players, former players, see it that way? Steve Smith Sr. was asked about the value of Xavier Legette. We'll see what he had to say, and we'll also hear from Spencer Rattler on what he can bring to an organization, and then we'll discuss whether or not it's worth maybe reaching beyond the 3rd round to be able to take him as the post-game show continues on this draft day. I guess we're now at a little under 2.5 hours or so until the NFL draft. Coverage starts at 7. Actually, see, a little less than 2 hours then. I'm not good at math. Can't do it. But I do know that it's happening very soon. The first round tonight on ESPN. And a lot of question marks. It's going to be a very quarterback-heavy draft. There's a really good possibility. I think it's actually kind of likely that we will see the draft start with Caleb Williams at 1 to the Chicago Bears, Jaden Daniels at 2 to the Washington Commanders, and then Drake May at 3 with the New England Patriots. And that's when I think all hell will eventually break loose. Went ahead and want to revisit our poll from earlier today. Started off the show like this, asking, posing the question, which quarterback will have the best career? Now, I'm sure a lot of folks, had the Gamecock color glasses on, but that's the fun part of this, right? You can do that. That's the freedom. That's the fun part here, is that we can have our Gamecock color glasses on. And looking at it right now, with the poll options being Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, or Spencer Rattler, we have 205 votes, and 65% say Spencer Rattler. In second is Jaden Daniels at 18.5%, followed by Caleb Williams at 8%, and then Drake May at 7.8%. So the consensus saying Spencer Rattler will have the best career of all of them, and Jaden Daniels in second. I definitely believe Jaden Daniels. I voted Jaden Daniels, and not just because of the Heisman. It's because of the numbers. And it's because of his ability to throw the deep ball, his ability to be a dual threat. So we got into that earlier. If you missed it, just go back to 1075thegame.com, be able to go to our podcast page, wherever you get your podcasts, or go on the app. We have a podcast tab on the app at the game, 1075 The Game app, or on YouTube TV, because this will be up there as well, and you don't have to go very far into the episode to hear that discussion. All you got to do is go on YouTube, go at The Game TV Radio, and, of course, our video stream, which you can watch right now live, is brought to you by Shepherd's Glass, a true reflection of quality. But besides the quarterbacks, because when one of the declarations, or I guess, or proclamations I made in the first hour was that there'll be a team that will trade into the top 10 and draft J.J. McCarthy. I do believe that will probably be the Minnesota Vikings. I could see them doing that. I can see them getting really desperate for a quarterback because of the way their team is situated right now with all that talent on the offensive side of the ball, that they're going to get desperate and try to beat somebody to the punch to get J.J. McCarthy. Maybe try to beat, Denver to the punch before they trade up. There's going to be a lot of that going on. I think they're going to trade up to get McCarthy, so there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks taken. There's going to be a ton of receivers taken. I think there's going to be 6 wide receivers taken in the first round. Unfortunately for Xavier Legette, I don't foresee his name being called, but I do think he'll be the first pick in the second round, and that he will be a Carolina Panther. There's a lot that he brings to the table. I wouldn't even be surprised if he's a first-round pick, because he's that type of talent, right? That one touchdown, one of the long touchdowns that he had against Mississippi State, one of the many, he clocked in at like a little over 23 miles an hour, which was the fastest that anyone has been clocked on a football field in 2023 in college or the NFL. He's got real NFL speed, and he's drawing a lot of A.J. Brown comps. And I don't think that that's blasphemous or out of the realm of possibility. I could see Xavier Legette being an A.J. Brown type player. Steve Smith Sr., former Panther wide receiver himself and former Ravens wide receiver, was asked about the value of Xavier Legette and exactly what he thinks Xavier Legette can be at the next level.
What I'm saying is I'm trying to figure out which Xavier Legette are we getting. Are we getting the 2023 dominant player? Or are we going to get the guy who's slowly showing us a few things? And I think that's why some teams, he hasn't in the beginning been an outright guy that says, man, he's a bona fide first-round pick. Now people are starting to, after watching his workout, watching more and more of his film, seeing how fast he ran a 4.39 at the 40 at the combine. Teams are like, hey, if we get an opportunity to get this guy, and he has a value. He plays special teams, kickoff return, then took a few to the house. So you can't just let that guy go by you if you have the opportunity to draft him and you need a wide receiver, because he's an X wide receiver. He plays the speed position. You could put him on the line of scrimmage. He could use his speed. He could use his strength to get off the jam. Yes, he gets tied up sometimes, but he's a big, burly kid that can use also his leverage and knows how to use his physicality to get open. And that's key. When you get open, do you use speed, strength, or savviness? Speed gives you separation. Savviness gives you separation. But strength gets you open. And he has all three of those. And that's hard to ignore and say, well, you only had one good year of production at the level of a first-round draft pick.
Interesting point there about the strength, right? He talks about strength getting you open. And it's not just strength that gets Xavier Legette open. I think when I think of Xavier Legette and I think of his strength, I think of him using it to make contested catches because he's one of the best contested catch guys that's in this draft right now. You know, you look at the play that he made against North Carolina on the first game of the year, down the sideline, making a tough contested catch. Made another tough contested catch against Georgia. Against really good competition, he made contested catches. He's got really good hands. We talk about the speed a lot, and Steve Smith in that clip did do a good job talking about how his speed creates his separation, how his savviness creates his separation. You know, he talked about him getting jammed at the line a little bit, and sometimes that can be hard to create separation with, but even if there's not a lot of separation, Xavier Legette is one of those wide receivers that if you throw the ball to him, I feel good about him being able to catch it, even if he's being, you know, held or jammed or doesn't have a ton of separation, especially if you pair him with a really good quarterback. Now, if he goes to Carolina, it's going to be really interesting to see exactly how Bryce Young progresses, right? How he's able to develop as a passer and to be able to put the ball in his catch radius. And Xavier Legette's got a really good catch radius, and that's going to bode well for him moving forward, especially if he does have to go play for Carolina, which I don't think would be the best place for him to succeed, but I think it's a likely destination. So he's got a lot of those intangibles. And the biggest thing, too, that I want to add to Steve is just that his strength doesn't just get him open. His strength makes him able, more so than maybe a lot of other receivers in this draft, be able to make contested catches. Excited to see where he goes. And then when it comes to Spencer Rattler, look, would be stunned to see him selected tonight. I'd be really surprised if Spencer Rattler was taken tonight in the first round. Will not be surprised if he was late second, early third, or maybe even fourth. There's a nice wide range of possibilities. But here's the thing, he's kind of going under the radar. He's had a really interesting career arc that other quarterbacks in this class maybe haven't had, or maybe didn't start off their careers with as much scrutiny. Jaden Daniels didn't play particularly well at Arizona State when he first got to campus, but he developed. Bo Nix was a polarizing figure at the Auburn fan base, but he developed. He went to Oregon, he developed, he got better. He was, Bo Nix was in the spotlight for something other than maybe Spencer Rattler, because Spencer Rattler was supposed to be an NFL quarterback ever since he got out of high school. That wasn't the expectation for Bo Nix. He was an Auburn legacy, which creates a different type of pressure, but he wasn't expected to be an NFL quarterback right away when he was at Auburn. And Caleb Williams also having a lot of hype, but he transferred not because he didn't lose a starting job. He transferred to follow Lincoln Riley. Spencer Rattler lost the starting job to Caleb Williams at Oklahoma, and we know the rest. We know the history here in Columbia, South Carolina. But what can Spencer Rattler bring to an organization? Here's his thoughts on what he can bring to an NFL league or an NFL organization.
I feel like I'm a guy that can make any throw on the field. Elite passer, very accurate, can process at a very high level, quick learner. Was in 3 different systems throughout college, played in 2 of the best conferences in college. I'm a guy that is a great leader. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to lead guys around me, make guys around me better, and I feel like I'm an ultimate competitor. So having those traits as a quarterback, I feel like you can be set up for success.
Yeah, those are good traits. Being able to process information really fast, being able to understand different types of offenses, being able to be adaptable, those are strengths. Those are strengths that's on Spencer Rattler's resume. I think those are strengths that are very attractive to someone like Sean Payton, which is why I think the Broncos maybe hold off on trying to trade into the top 10 to get a quarterback, and that maybe they stick back a little bit and maybe take him later on in, the 3rd round with their 3rd round pick, maybe around 76. I think the Broncos might be able to do that because, look, Spencer Rattler, I can see him being a really good pro. because of that adaptability, because of that mental toughness, because of the maturity that he's shown, because that process hadn't been easy. There's some humbling that it takes whenever you lose your job very publicly, lose your starting role on a team like Oklahoma very publicly on national television, right? There's something to be said about that, and then bouncing back and getting back into the position where he's going to be an NFL quarterback. And I think he can contend for a starting job. I think his ultimate career arc will be a really good backup who has to start some games. But when Spencer Rattler enters the game for your favorite team or the team that you're watching, that you're not going to feel like they're in bad hands whenever he steps out onto the field. Interested to see where he goes. Won't be tonight, but it will be over the weekend. And by Monday's show, we'll know exactly where Spencer Rattler will be competing in training camp. Drive around the SEC coming up as the postgame show continues. From the WIS Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to report to you that are causing some delays on the roadways this afternoon. And the good news is that there's only two. It's actually been pretty clear for the most part today. Both of these accidents are here in Richland County. The first one is on Pendleton Street near Walnut. That's causing some minor traffic delay. And the other one is going to be on Highway 1 at Augusta Road at Taylor Street and Forest Drive. And as soon as I read that off, another one has just been reported. Also in Richland County, an accident at Atlas Road at US 378 near Garner's Ferry Road is causing some minor traffic backup. But just those three so far here on the roadways this afternoon. Time to take a drive around the SEC here on the post-game show and get into some of the baseball, I guess, that's going to start. There are two series in the SEC that are going to start tonight, but we have some transfer portal news. Look, I hypothesized that the spring transfer portal in college football, that period, that window, wouldn't be anywhere near as exciting as the one in the winter. Not wrong. It's not anywhere close to as exciting in terms of just the sheer amount of names that are in it and the big names, but it is not lacking for drama. We'll go ahead and start off with Jaden Rashada. He has officially announced where he is going to be playing. Now, for those who might be hearing this and say, wait, I've heard the name Jaden Rashada before. Haven't you and Jay Phillips talked about Jaden Rashada? Well, the answer is yes, because Jaden Rashada became the poster boy, or his case, rather, not him. I don't want to put this on him. But his situation became the ultimate precautionary tale on what can go wrong with certain third-party NIL collectives. Now, a lot of NIL collectives do things the right way. But for Florida, they had a third-party NIL collective that promised Jaden Rashada north of $13 million to come to the University of Florida and play quarterback. Rashada, obviously a highly coveted five-star player coming out of high school, accepted the deal like anybody else would. Shoot, I'd go play for, Wyoming Tech for $13 million and be the team punching bag. I'd do that. So for $13 million, obviously he was offered and goes to Gainesville, signs his NLI, and it turns out they don't have $13 million to give him. It's like that scene in Semi-Pro where the guy goes out on the floor at halftime and hits that full court shot for $100,000, and Will Ferrell, who's owning the team, says, "We don't have $100,000. We just wrote something on a check to make it look official, thinking no one else would hit it." I'm sure maybe they didn't think he would accept the deal. Well, he did. He goes to campus. They don't have that money, and then he has to get released from his NLI very publicly, and it made Billy Napier in Florida look really bad. That this kid was promised this, and they didn't have anywhere near the funds to be able to provide him with it. So then he gets released from his NLI. It's a big national story. And then he goes to Arizona State, where they are on a self-imposed bowl ban and having zero shot to do anything that year. New coach, completely cleaned house. They're now going to have to, rise from the ashes after their NCAA sanctions, after they got in trouble, thanks to Herm Edwards and his coaching staff, who were obviously show cause thrown around everywhere there. A lot of those guys that were on that staff are not going to be coaching college football anytime soon. But Rashada played last season at Arizona State sparingly, threw for 485 yards in total on the season. They had like 4 different quarterbacks play for them. It was a gross situation in Tempe. But 485 yards on the season. He threw for 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Gets back into the transfer portal, and he'll be playing for the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, this season, Carson Beck is going to be the starter. Duh. He's going to start this upcoming season, and will be one of the favorites, I'd say, to win the Heisman. But Jaden Rashada will be backing him up, and there's maybe some reason to believe that he'll be the quarterback of the future in Athens. But Jaden Rashada, a once highly coveted high school football prospect, has announced that he is committed to play for the Georgia Bulldogs. And then, of course, another transfer portal news, too. This guy was one of the best edge rushers in the SEC, one of the most productive edge rushers in the SEC. That is Tyler Barron. Barron originally put his name in the transfer portal back in December, committed to Ole Miss as part of their just absolutely stupid, loaded transfer portal recruiting haul that they made, that Lane Kiffin and staff made. But before the semester, he decided to transfer again, and he transferred to Louisville. Well, he participated in the spring for Louisville and put his name back in the transfer portal. This man is now on school number 3 in like 3 or 4 different months. But he's in the transfer portal right now. He will visit Miami this weekend, according to Pete Nakos on on3.com. He has been told that Tyler Barron will visit Miami this weekend. And Tyler Barron, as so far for his career, like I said, very, very highly touted, very productive. He tallied 130 career tackles and 13.5 career sacks. So potentially, Miami's getting a very impressive edge rusher, which would be a pretty big deal. Pretty big deal for them if he decides to commit and actually make it through fall camp and get to play, and we'll see him. We'll see it where I'll believe it when I see it, when he's lined up and in a uniform and playing for somebody on August 31st, whenever everybody's playing their first game. Pete Nakos also has what he calls an RPM prediction for Penn State transfer Keandre Lambert-Smith, the wide receiver from Penn State. Had a really productive season for the Nittany Lions last year, and Pete Nakos is predicting that he will go to Auburn. That would be a really big get for Auburn. Auburn, ended up making a bowl game last year, but got completely thumped, right? And the other school that's kind of been floated around, Keandre Lambert-Smith is definitely probably going to be playing the SEC next year because he has boiled it down to Texas A&M or Auburn, but he officially, according to Pete Nakos, says that he'll more than likely be going to play for Auburn on the Plains. Alabama in basketball gets another player to enter the transfer portal. Ryan Walters, who is now going to be playing at Michigan, entered the transfer portal. Rylan Griffin entered the transfer portal after the Final Four run. I've seen where he's potentially going to go play for Kansas, which I get, pretty good basketball upgrade right there. A lot of players are jumping ship. And one of those players just a couple days ago was Muhammad Wagi, who's a backup forward for this team. He is putting himself in the transfer portal, so Alabama losing a lot from their Final Four team. And lastly, on the basketball transfer portal front, Kentucky center Ugonna Onyenso, who just last week declared for the NBA draft and said the transfer portal is not an option. If you hear beeping, that's the sound of Onyenso backing up on that claim, and now has saying he will enter the transfer portal. That was also another Pete Nakos report. He'll be entering the transfer portal, maybe following Coach Cal to Arkansas. I don't know. Hasn't released exactly the schools that he is considering just yet, but Ugonna Onyenso, a really good rim protector, solid rim running forward, is in the transfer portal. We'll see where he ends up going. And on the baseball front, tonight we have two games on here tonight, one on ESPNU, one on SEC Network. These series that are starting will be Ole Miss and Alabama. That one's going to be in Oxford. That's going to be on ESPNU. And then on SEC Network, Missouri will travel to Knoxville to take on Tennessee just 1 week after taking 2 of 3 against Kentucky on the road. And then tomorrow, every series in the SEC will be in play, including Georgia at Texas A&M, which will be one of the series to watch this upcoming weekend. Kentucky and South Carolina starts. You can hear that on 107.5 The Game, 6:45 pregame, 7 o'clock first pitch. Mississippi State will be at Vanderbilt. Auburn will be at struggling LSU. And then Florida will be at Arkansas. So those are the matchups in the SEC this week. And coming up next, there's a lot of sports on tonight. Some NBA playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs, the NFL draft. Outside of the NFL draft, I'll tell you what else I'll be watching, keeping an eye on as we wrap up Thursday's edition of the Postgame Show next. One final segment here on the post-game show. I'm Elijah Campbell. Thanks for hanging out with me up until 6 o'clock. Tomorrow, after we go off the air, we'll have a couple of best of segments before we get to the opener of the baseball series, South Carolina and Kentucky. That pregame is going to start at 6:45, and the first pitch will be at 7 o'clock over at Founders Park. Our guy Derek Scott will be on the call with Stuart Lake. We'll break down that series a little more in detail tomorrow. Talked about today in the second hour. So if you're going back and looking on the post-game show podcast feed, second hour is where you'll find a lot of the baseball breakdown. We'll get into more of it tomorrow, too, as the series gets underway, a massive one for the Gamecock baseball team. But there's some stuff to watch for tonight. Obviously, the NFL draft is the headliner. It's something to watch. And look, there's going to be a lot of intrigue after pick 3. Caleb Williams will be taken 1 by Chicago Bears. Feel pretty good about that. Feel pretty good about Jaden Daniels going number 2 to the Washington Commanders, even though they might change their mind and go Drake May. Really possible. But then regardless, I feel like the Patriots are going to be taking a quarterback. So at 3, I think they'll take Drake May. The fun will happen at 4. We'll see what the Arizona Cardinals do. I know they're definitely taking phone calls in terms of teams that are going to want to desperately try to trade up. Someone like, the Minnesota Vikings to get a J.J. McCarthy. I think that can possibly happen. I think there's a good chance something like that ends up happening tonight, of a team being just desperate enough for a quarterback to trade into the top 10 to try to get their guy. But if I'm the Arizona Cardinals, look, I'm just taking a Maserati Marv at 4 and calling it a day. But we'll see. There's a lot to watch for at the NFL draft. There's also a lot of playoff action, NBA and Stanley Cup playoff tonight. And on the NBA front, look, there are 3 teams that are trying to avoid 3-0 deficits on their home court. The first one's going to be tonight on TNT at 7:30, Sixers and Knicks. Look, I don't know if you can lose a game in more heartbreaking fashion than the Philadelphia 76ers lost game 2 at Madison Square Garden, where they were up 4 points with 27 seconds left. Jalen Brunson hits a 3. Chaos ensues underneath the basket when Tyrese Maxey isn't able to corral the inbounds pass. One rushed three-pointer by Dante DiVincenzo's missed. A frantic offensive rebound by Isaiah Hartenstein leads to another chance for Dante DiVincenzo. DiVincenzo drills the 3. Knicks win. Sixers lose. They're up 2-0 in the series. That's a fun series to watch because Joel Embiid is clearly the best player, even though he's not 100%. So if you love good basketball, Joel Embiid's a really good player, but the Knicks are a really fun team. I guess maybe you can consider Jalen Brunson a superstar at this point, but for those who watch a lot of college basketball, he was the National Player of the Year when Villanova won their second national title under Jay Wright, and he was clearly the best player on that team and in the country. But that team, this Knicks team, is that Villanova team reincarnated because their best player is Jalen Brunson. Their best player off the bench is Dante DiVincenzo, who was the most outstanding player of that last national championship for Villanova. And Josh Hart, who played a vital role on that first championship team, is arguably their best role player and Swiss Army knife, a guy who can do a little bit of everything for him. He can shoot. That part of his game has improved. He defends really well. He gets on the floor for loose balls. They're scrappy. It's a very scrappy bunch, and led by 3 Villanova players in the absence of Julius Randle has been pretty massive. So the Knicks are fun to watch. Can they make it a 3-0 series lead in Philly? I doubt it, but it'll be worth watching. The Sixers are 5.5-point favorites in that one. The Cleveland Cavaliers, if you have NBA TV, are looking to get a 3-0 series lead against the Orlando Magic. Look, the Magic are fun. The Magic are good. If you've taken a hiatus on the NBA over the last few years, it would shock you to hear that the Orlando Magic are in the playoffs. Well, they've played really well. They're going to try to avoid getting down 3-0. It's unfortunate that one's on NBA TV because I don't have NBA TV, but I'll definitely be keeping up with it. And then tonight, the nightcap on TNT, so probably around 10 o'clock is when this bad boy starts. Lakers and Nuggets. Look, the Lakers are down 2-0. They probably lost in even more heartbreaking fashion than the next thing I answer my own question, or than the Sixers, when they got beat after blowing a 20-point lead in Game 2, and Jamal Murray hitting a fall-away buzzer-beating 3 over Anthony Davis. About as bad as you can end that game, and a game that was totally winnable for Los Angeles ends up getting basically, peed away in the final minutes, and that's, really the nice FCC-appropriate way of saying that. And as a Laker fan, do I feel really confident they win this game tonight? Absolutely not. The EBPI is getting broken back out for this right now, and the Lakers, I will give them a 30% chance to win tonight, and to win the series, it's at like 2. They are not winning this series at all. And I'm somebody who's an optimist as a sports fan. Lakers are my favorite team. I think you can go ahead and pencil the Nuggets into the second round, and you can almost pencil them in to be a favorite to end up winning the whole thing yet again. They're really good. And then in the Stanley Cup playoffs tonight, definitely keeping tabs on Lightning Panthers because that's been a fascinating series. They went to overtime in Game 2, and if you don't watch a lot of hockey, if you get an alert that a game's going to overtime, you turn it to that turn your TV to that channel immediately because it's must-watch stuff. Lightning Panthers playing tonight. That's in Tampa. The Panthers have a 2-0 series lead, so they're looking to put a stranglehold on that series. And look, that one might be able to go to overtime again. They're two very evenly matched teams. It's an in-state rivalry. That one's been a really fun series to get to keep up with. And then lastly, this is going to be on ESPN2. The Carolina Hurricanes are playing at the New York Islanders. Jack Veltri, our man Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central, his beloved New York Islanders, they're playing in New York with a chance to go up 3-0 as well. So in the Stanley Cup final or Stanley Cup playoffs and the NBA playoffs, every team that is playing at home is looking to fight off a 3-0 deficit. And you know what? I guess if we're calling shots tonight out of the 5 games in which teams try to avoid that 3-0 deficit, I want to say 3 of them do so. 3 of those 5 will end up making a series of it, and 2 of those 5 will end up being in a pretty bad shape. So that in the NFL draft, what I'm watching for tonight, and of course, if we're calling shots here too, we're making predictions on the way out, I'm going to go ahead and say it. We're going to have 6 wide receivers taken in the first round tonight. 6. Exactly 6. Joe Alt will end up being the first player that's going to be selected tonight to end up making an all-pro team. The Vikings are going to trade into the top 10, try to get their quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. Xavier Legette won't be picked tonight. We'll see him picked tomorrow night. And I feel pretty good about Brock Bowers being a New York Jet. So we'll see if it happens. We'll have some fun with it. Reaction tomorrow night, or tomorrow afternoon, up until 6 o'clock. This is the Postgame Show. We'll see you tomorrow.